Hi everyone, and welcome to our audience. I'm Dr. Rameen Talesh, Assistant Vice Chancellor for Student Life and Leadership and Dean of Students, and I'm here with our Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, Dr. Willie Banks.
Thank you, Rameen. My name is Willie Banks, Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs here at the University of California, Irvine. And I know that it has been a really trying week for not only our community here in Irvine, but for the entire country. And so it's been really unprecedented for, lots of us in higher education, the decisions that we've had to make. But then also the other piece is that this is a really serious issue and that we really have to get a handle on it. And we as a community have to make some hard decisions to really mitigate the risk and really try to bring down the severity. I know that people have heard about flattening the curve, and we're going to have to do our best. And unfortunately, that's going to really make all of us in the administration and the community have to make some sacrifices and make some hard decisions. But I feel for everyone out there. I know that our graduates are really feeling really a lot of anxiety and stress at the moment. I just want to share with everyone, I have a niece who's about to graduate from college, and she is facing the very real possibility that her life is being upended, and she's going through all those emotions. So it is not lost on me that we're really facing some unprecedented times, and we really have to work together and be flexible around these issues.
So Dr. Banks, you're alluding to postponement or cancellation of commencement. Can you share what should students and families expect at this point?
Well, I think it's important for everybody to understand, this decision was not made lightly. It was really in consultation with a number of people and individuals. I'm not sure that our audience understands that we graduate close to 8,000 to 9,000 students over 4 or 5 days in June. And we typically hold those commencement ceremonies in the Bren. And when we were talking about the guidance that we were receiving and looking at the trajectory of the pandemic, it was becoming quite obvious that we were really going to have to address this issue. We didn't want to get into the situation where families were making decisions to come to commencement when we knew that this could really be a bad situation. And so that's really what's driving our decision to cancel commencement. The other piece that I think is being lost in the conversation is that we were always thinking about what are some other options. Because I do think, and I want people to hear me when I say this, commencement is such a monumental occasion for our students, not only for our first-gen students, but for everyone who has completed a college degree to be able to walk across that stage. And that, in that moment, is sort of a defining moment for a lot of folks' lives. And we don't want to take that away. But we are working on a couple of different options and thinking about, can we do this virtually? And what would a virtual commencement look like for our graduates? And so we're working on plans. It takes a lot of coordination. There's a lot of moving parts. And so we're still trying to figure out that piece. What I can tell you, though, is that we are making plans to do a winter commencement program. For those people who don't want to participate in the virtual, or if they still want to do the virtual and this one, that's going to be fine. We're trying to work out the details, but what our hope is that during the December break, that we would actually be able to have folks who are in this time frame that are not going to be able to participate in commencement come back and actually have the pomp and circumstances and have the commencement ceremony. Now, I say all of that with a huge asterisk saying, if things are better. But the reality is that we don't know the trajectory of this, and if we don't flatten this curve, this can be overwhelming for our entire healthcare system, for people in general, and we just all need to understand that we're going to try to pull this off for the winter, but this may change as well. And people need to be flexible and understand that we're really trying to really balance the line of keeping our community healthy, but then also celebrating our graduates.
I love the fact that we're looking at creative solutions for this. Where can people go to be updated on those commencement plans?
Well, we do have a website, the Corona, and I'm going to screw up the website name, but I think it's uci.edu coronavirus. And that information will have the most up-to-date information for our students, faculty, staff, and families. There will be some guidance that hopefully will come out soon related to commencement, and it'll come from our commencement office that will give specifics about the virtual piece, but then also about the winter planning. But everything's still planning. We still have to figure out how do we do all of these things, and these decisions we didn't have months to make these decisions. We're doing this, and we're trying to be really mindful of this. So I would say direct everyone to that website, the uci.edu coronavirus, for information.
That's where we can get updates.
Yes.
All right, so why don't we change gears a little bit to kind of what's going on right now? Are students required to return home right now?
The guidance that we have provided is that if students choose to go home, they can. But we also understand that their homes may be within our residence halls, and that is okay if they make that decision that they want to stay. What we have also told our residents, and this is important to understand, is that we need to know by March the 18th, which I believe is Wednesday. And that date was selected because we don't want our students to go into, it's all tied to financial aid packaging and really looking at disbursements and bills. We don't want our students to reach this deadline and then all of a sudden they move off campus and then they get a bill. So we're really trying to minimize all of the headaches that come across with all of these changes. So the deadline is March 18th for notification, but our students who are living in the residence hall who choose to go back home, they have until March 29th to go back home. So that is an important piece. There's the 18th for notification, but you still have time until March 29th to get your belongings and saying, I'm going home to my family, parents, friends, wherever they're going.
And that includes ACC properties?
That includes ACC properties, but every resident should have received an email with this information, and we will do follow-up emails because I know that sometimes our emails, there's a lot of emails flying, but I would say for our students, make sure to look for the ones from housing, from student affairs. They should read all of them. I shouldn't actually say only look at ours, but they should read every email that's coming across.
Right. Okay. And if students are trying to return home or they can't because they have limited travel abilities, can they terminate their lease and return home later in the quarter?
If they have special circumstances, talk to the housing office and they were going to work with every person and we're going to try to figure out what's the best solution for every student because unfortunately there isn't one wide answer that I can say for every student because everyone has a special circumstance. I will say just contact the housing office.
One of the questions I think that's out there also is about financial aid.
Yeah.
And we know that financial aid is different for every individual.
Yeah, absolutely.
But do you have any advice or words of wisdom for folks that are on financial aid that are nervous about what this means to their aid?
Absolutely. And I think the one thing that people need to do is really contact the financial aid office. It is not good to get your information from Reddit as far as financial aid policies or just policies in general, or from Twitter or from Instagram. Call the financial aid office, send them an email, because every individual is different. Their case really needs to be looked at by a financial aid officer. Even in our positions, and between the both of us, we probably have 50 plus years of higher ed experience.
That's right.
But I don't know that we would even be able to give the best financial aid advice to someone. The best advice that I can provide to anyone is contact the financial aid office.
Yeah, that's definitely a no-fly zone.
Yes.
I never talk about financial aid with students.
We're going to redirect and say, let's talk to the financial aid office.
Give it to the professionals and the experts.
Absolutely.
One of the things that other students talk about and staff talk about, what about like parking permits?
Yeah. So parking has already released information. It's on their website, and I think they've also released it via social media. You can take your parking permit and go visit the parking office, and they'll give you a prorated refund for your parking pass permit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, how does that work for maybe students that are commuting in and are going to maybe have to go to a lab?
Yeah.
Maybe do research. Where do they park, or what should they do?
Yeah, I think one of the things, there's a couple of things that I'm going to answer or attempt to answer that question. Okay. One, for anybody in those situations, please contact your professor or your lab person, the person in charge of that lab, to find out what's going on. Because the guidance changes almost on a daily basis, what we say now may not apply to someone.
Right. So I would say we need a disclaimer.
We really do, because the thing is, it is changing literally almost every hour. I would say first check with your lab instructor and then also your professor to find out what's going on. The second piece is you can then contact the parking office to figure out what's the best situation for you as far as parking on campus. That may be a permit just for an hour or a couple hours, but call the parking office to find that out.
Okay. That's another one where I defer questions.
Oh gosh,
on
absolutely.
Parking.
Yes.
All right. So now a big part of the student experience being at UCI is the out of classroom experiences. Yeah. I know that's close to me as the dean of students. So from clubs and orgs to student government to volunteer service, undergraduate research. How will programs continue in the spring? What's it going to look like?
It's going to be different. It's going to be, what we're doing is we're actually we're telling our staff that they actually need a telecommute. So for a number of 20-something years, I'm used to going into office and interacting with our staff and seeing students on a physical campus. But because of the guidance, and they're saying, and we have to really take this to heart, the social distancing is so important that we really have to separate people. And so what I'm encouraging people to do is to be creative. So for my staff, we are going to have a staff meeting for a 20 or 30 minute check-in, like Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays at some point in time during the day. For our students, I would say think about how to be creative, to do Zoom-ins, to do virtual meetups, to still encourage and look at your social media pieces, and also how can you connect to other people in other places. I think the other piece that people really need to understand, though, is that large gatherings and the events and those types of things, they really should not be happening. We really have to get into the social distancing, and I think that's going to be very, very difficult, not only for our students, but just for the general population. I mean, I think people want interactions. And so the entire notion of that we need to have space and that we don't need to be in enclosed spaces, hundreds of people in a small space, it's going to be a little bit different. So what I would encourage people to do is try to figure out, how do I do virtual meetings, okay? How can we still have programs that are virtual? One of the things that I'm hoping that some of our units will do, will be able to provide classes that, 30-minute classes online that people can just Zoom in, and up to a certain capacity, if you have the Zoom capability, to come in and see the classes. I've seen everything from story time. I've seen everything from music lessons. I think this is going to really force everyone to think creatively, because I don't think that any of us have really had to be in our own spaces for an extended period of time and not have that human connection. And I think that's going to be really interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, it'll be a unique challenge.
It will, but I think that we're up to it. I think we're creative. I'm sure that someone's going to be shooting some TikTok videos and entertaining our clients and our students on campus. I'm sure that our students will come up with some brilliant ideas to hold some virtual meetups. But I'm hoping that everybody really takes to heart, we have to do the social distancing, and we have to flatten the curve. That is so important.
Now, how can students continue to receive services from some entities like the Counseling Center, our Fresh Basic Needs Hub, Student Health Center, Disability Services Center, because those are real important offices.
Absolutely.
As are all of our offices.
Absolutely. And so I think it's really interesting, since we're going into this phase now of thinking of what's the essential, non-essential functions of the campus. For student affairs, we will continue to have resident dining, and the really interesting piece about that is that we won't have the traditional Brandywine and eatery as far as people going up to self-serve or being served things. We're actually going to all box meals. So students, if you're living on campus, you will then have a time period to get your breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and you would go to one place and pick up that your food. We will also keep open housing, because that's where our students are. We're trying to find out how many students are planning to stay beyond spring break, and we will continue to be open to provide them with services. And of course, our Student Health Center will continue to be open. But there are precautions about the Student Health Center. If you're displaying any symptoms before you come to the health center, you need to call someone. You actually, there's going to be a triage area, because the worst thing that can happen is that someone who thinks that they may be infected walking into another space and infecting more people. So we've got to really try to minimize that. For finals week and beyond, you can still call and get appointments to the counseling center, but it may be done remotely as far as on a Zoom call. We will also still have services through our Disabilities Service Center for students who need accommodations. So just pick up the phone, call them, or send them an email, and they will work with you. And the same thing around our international population. I know they have lots of questions related to visas, so our International Center is still up and running at the moment, but once finals are over, they'll go remotely, and then you can ask questions, and they will be able to connect with you. And the same thing with our Veterans Center. So just because we are now working remotely does not mean that our students are going to be at a disadvantage. They will just have to switch modes, and as far as let me go to Dean Rameen's office to ask a question, it may be let me email Dean Rameen, or let me schedule a Zoom call to find out about X, Y, and Z. That's going to be very different for everyone. And it's not just our students, but everyone, because I think people are used to, let me just go down the hall and ask this question. And now we're going to have to be very intentional to say, let me email this question, or let me set up a Zoom call to answer the question.
Right. So our students, they do a tremendous amount of volunteer work in the community, tens of thousands of hours spent in the community. And I'm sure a lot of them really want to give back even right now and help in some way, but we're in this situation. So, I just want to say, what can students do at this point in terms of service or volunteering? Or
stay home and flatten the curve. I mean, I'll be honest with you, that's going to be their best way of service. I think the other thing for them to look out for, are there opportunities virtually to either host story time for maybe families that have children at home? Or is there a way for someone who has to teach lessons as far as virtually from their home to other people, to teach someone how to play the guitar? I think that we have to be very creative and really encouraging our students to do things virtually, but we can't just hang out and do our service projects and go and build a house typically with a habitat or things like that. Not at the moment, and we're going to have to wait and see until we really figure out what's going on.
All right. I think with that, we've done all that we need to do here today. I mean, just reinforcing social distancing, making sure that you are thinking about not just yourself, but really about others, because we could be a carrier and we don't even know it. So it's really not sometimes about some of our healthy young folks that are in college, but it's more about our parents and our friends and our family members, and so just keeping it that way. So thank you, Dr. Banks, as
You're
always.
welcome,
Great
Rameen.
job.
Thank you very
on
much.
The fly.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anteater family. Hang in there, and hope to see you virtually in the future, at least.
Yes. Zot, zot, zot.
Zot, zot.